Good evening. I think we're ready to go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jeff Badnock, and on behalf of our organizing committee and our amazing Alumni Association staff and our lecturers, I am proud and happy to welcome you to the final lecture of the 20th Annual Alumni Association Community Lecture Series, Clearing the Air with Real Evidence. This series was developed over 20 years ago to deepen UM and community ties by showcasing UM's faculty lecturing about their fields of research in a variety of talks, more or less collected around a central theme. I want to thank the fine people at the Alumni Association for their work in putting this center together. Your dues as members to the Alumni Association help support this program and other programs that the Alumni Association puts on. So thank you for that. Additionally, I think it is in order for us to thank all the faculty lecturers who shared their research and insights with us over the past 6 weeks. After tonight's program, we will have a reception to which all of you are invited. It will be in room 300, which is out the auditorium doors. Turn left and go down through the double doors. Keep moving, you'll find it. Cell phones. Anybody need to be reminded about their cell phones? Okay. This evening's presentation will be recorded for replay on MCAT, so during the question and answer periods, please wait for one of us to bring you a microphone so we can capture your questions and comments, and everyone in the audience can hear what it is you have to say. Incidentally, MCAT has begun to broadcast our lectures this year. They can be seen on Wednesday nights at 9:30 on MCAT channel 189, as well as a repeat on Sunday nights at 5:30 p.m. Again on channel 189. If you don't have a TV, you can see the cable cast at the same time at mcat.org on your PC or laptop. After many summers of suffocating from wildfires, everyone is frustrated by losing some of the joy of Montana's summers, and they couldn't help but wonder, why don't they do something about that? And the boldest among us lob critiques telling us what they did wrong. It's our hope that this series gave you some insights on how to better formulate questions and criticisms relative to wildfires. Similarly, reading the paper or news online, we often wonder why it is that it costs so much and takes so long to get justice. Professors Gross and Holist pried back the curtains on that and gave us some insight into those issues. But our world is a crazy place where we are bombarded with information. With the torrent of information coming at us, why aren't we smarter and better informed? Tonight, we will be capping this year's lecture series with a panel of presenters from UM's faculty who will take up with the central question, how do we know the truth when evidence is always changing? At any university worth the name, especially one whose motto is Lux et Veritas, light and truth, this question should be held close to its core values. To help us explore this question, please allow me to introduce tonight's panel. First, Chris Comer, who is the Dean of College of Humanities and Sciences, Tom Deluca, Dean of the W.A. Franke College of Forestry and Conservation, Anna Sala, Professor of Plant Biology, and Dane Scott, Associate Professor and Director of the Manfield Center for Ethics and Public Affairs, who will lead us off tonight. Please welcome our panel.
Well, I guess I drew the short straw. I get us started. I'm excited to be on this. This is a really important topic. And I'll talk a little bit about it later. In 2016, post-truth was, by the Oxford Dictionary, the word of the year. And I hope we don't live in the post-truth era. Hopefully we'll shed some light on these topics and maybe a little truth, too. But I think, with this distinguished group of people here, exploring this topic, I think, is extremely important because we do live in the post-truth era. And I see it in some of my students. There's this one really bright young man that sits in my Ethics and Public Affairs course. And I feel like I want to strangle this guy Because every topic we go into, he goes, well, that's subjective. Well, it can't all be subjective, right? Otherwise, everybody's got their own little world that they live in, and how do we share a social world? And he always just, the other day, I really kind of went after him on this one. He's a good guy, I like him, so he's up for it. He said, well, science can tell us anything, right? And so it is disturbing that this sort of post-truth area is sort of entering our students' minds. And I think part of what our job is, and what I see my job as a professor is just to bring kids up to speed, right? In other words, we've been around for a while, we know a little something, and hopefully we tell them before we take off what we know, maybe pass on, if they're listening, some of that stuff, and it's their world, right? And we hope we can pass on a little light and truth to them. And I think that's part of that is preparing them for citizenship, right? And I have a quote here I'm going to read to sort of set the stage, because this is a university, and that's kind of the context. And this is from Michael Walzer. He's, I believe, a Princeton philosopher. He says, the education of every child affects every other child, potential citizens. Like actual citizens are mutually engaged, they're responsible for one another. Think of citizenship as a political office. Surely future office holders should learn about their responsibilities the office entails. Or better, the current office holders should teach the next generation what they think they have learned about those responsibilities. So we sort of pass on these responsibilities. And I think as you've seen in this discussions on wildfire and on criminal justice, that there is this relationship between data, information. And I think we can't wing it anymore, right? We live on a planet with 7.5 billion people moving toward 10 billion people. I always tell my students, well, they always share, they have like 4 or 5 roommates crammed in a small house. And I go, what if that was 10 students you shared your room with? Or 15, right? We do this sort of doubling. Things would be different, right? You'd have to solve problems. Systems would start to be impacted. You'd have to get a little better organized, right? And I think in our world, we got to, we have to. I think science got us where we are in terms of 7 billion people and all this technology. I think it's going to, if we're going to keep it going, and live decent lives, that we have to be responsible for the scientific information that we get. And I think that's part of it. I think one of the things we have to learn is our responsibilities to the truth, right? And I think we have some fidelity to the truth. But I don't know, truth is tricky, right? It can't certainly mean, it can't mean certainty. Because science and evidence, philosophers like to say we are finite and fallible, right? That just means we have these small brains in this big universe and all this information, and we make a lot of mistakes. And scientists and other people that collect information for us make mistakes, right? So that's just part of who we are. And so there's always uncertainty with any kind of information we get. All levels of, some things are more certain than others, right? We know that you're better off vaccinating your kids than not, right? There's a lot of information. That's pretty much, there's a lot to back that up. Part of my research is into GMOs, biotechnology, and 90% of the corn grown in the U.S. is now genetically modified. So I would say that's probably safe if we've been eating it for 20 years, right? So there's stuff like that, that is controversy, but nonetheless, there's a lot of evidence on one side. And so there may be some subjectivity to it, but there's a lot of objectivity to it, too. So there's actually 3 kinds, and I won't bore you with a bunch of details, but of uncertainty. One, there's indeterminacy, right, where you just don't know all the causal chains. And that was like, is nicotine addictive? Do cigarettes cause cancer? Does the smoke in the air during fire season, is that really a significant health hazard? Those sorts of things. We may not know all those causal links, right? We may need more information. There's ambiguity. There might be a couple of different explanations for a particular event, right? And there's ignorance. This is Donald Rumsfeld famous, there are unknown unknowns, right? The stuff we just don't know, right, out there. So science is always subject to revision. It's always sort of an incomplete because human beings are finite and fallible, right? We always make mistakes. We have limited information and limited abilities. But I do think it's disturbing when I see my students just chuck it over the edge, right, in the post-truth era, given the fact that, we need as much information as we can. And, we've been doing this for a long time. All the food that we eat was a result of experimentation and evidence, right? You look over at your friend Joe, he eats that berry, he gets sick, throws up, almost dies. You go, well, we're not going to eat that berry, right? We did a lot of this, right? Trying to gather evidence on what foods we can eat. We did a lot of experimentation, and it works, right? So a lot of this, though, I think what happened is people started playing with this level of uncertainty, right, to take advantage. And I think one of the most notable things, I think there was a film with Russell Crowe about this, but there was an internal memo in one of the tobacco companies that says, doubt is our product. And so given that there's always a little uncertainty in most scientific information, if you can promote doubt, you can use that to your own advantage, right? If you have an agenda, if you have a vested interest. And so I think that's been done a lot, that scientific uncertainty has become something of a political football. In the case of fire management, right? In the case of criminal justice reform. If you have a particular agenda, you can use the data if you want, or the collected information to push your agenda. And I think that's unfortunate. I think that's part of the post-truth era, part of the challenge that we as educators and scientists need to overcome, right? Because we need this information. We can't wing it. There are consequences to doing dumb stuff, right? And so part of the themes when we got together and talked about this was trust and responsibility, right? In relationship to the truth, in relationship to evidence, in relationship to things like fire, criminal justice reform, and other things in our lives. And I think within certain professions, that's emphasized. Engineers, I'll just read a couple of things, because engineers really do take trust and responsibility with their scientific information that they have. And one of their, part of their code of ethics is they hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. So there's public trust that they know what they're doing. They perform services only in their area of competence, right? I'm not sure we would want to run this by our politicians, but we do hope they do that first one, right? That they do have that public good. Whether they're competent or not, I don't know. They perform services only in the area of competence, I've said, and they issue of public statements only in objective and truthful manner, right? They're supposed to convey these facts and what they know truthfully. Conservation biologists are the same way. But conservation biology deals with a lot of uncertainty because it's a complex science, right? The world is a very complex place. And they said that they need to recognize uncertainty is inherent. And they need to disseminate information and promote understanding. So there's responsibilities with these sort of roles that we play in society, right? So ordinary citizens, right? So we have political leaders, we have scientists, we have experts, we have managers that run fires, we have people that, run the criminal justice system. We hope that they're trustworthy and that they're exercising their responsibility in the public trust in terms of their relationship to information, right? Data. But what's our job, right, as ordinary citizens? And I think I listened to this podcast. It's called The Gist. And they have a little segment on it. And this is not the exact title of the segment, but it's pretty close. Is that BS? Right? So they'll take some controversial thing out there, and they'll go through it, right? And I think that's kind of our job as citizens, is to be able to know if someone is honest, if they are trustworthy. So whether the experts, scientists, politicians, managers, are they trustworthy, right? And can we trust them with their responsibilities? That's one relationship. But another thing is I think human beings, again, we have these sort of foibles, right? We have weaknesses. And some things get in the way of that. And I think I wrote a paper with a friend and we used 4S, but you could use anything you wanted here. But one is fortune, right? We do know that people have vested interest in making money. Maybe they, in terms of fire or criminal justice, someone might be vested, with their career, with their wealth, in terms of having one system over another, even though the information says that is, kind of a stupid thing to do. They might promote that system, right? Because they're vested in that. Another would be fear of being wrong, losing face. For example, if you've been pushing a certain sort of fire policy for your whole career, do you admit you're wrong? Is there a certain sort of courage to admitting you're wrong because you will lose face? Some might be fame, right? I know scientists might pursue fame and might ignore certain sorts of experiments and data just because it might wreck their reputation, right, or something like that. Another one, this is the one I want to focus on just a little bit, is fanaticism. And I think this is becoming another, I said people sort of abusing the uncertainty in science to promote their agenda. I think we're slipping into more polar ideologies. And fanaticism might stand for more extreme ideologies. And part of that, I think, has to do with the internet. There's a thinker who talks about, and I think you might be familiar, the daily me, right? In other words, with the internet, you can only get information that's targeted at you in your interest group, right? And so you're never getting disconfirming information. There was a study in Colorado in 2006 where they looked at this phenomenon of polarization. And so they took a group from Boulder. I guess they might be liberal, I'm not sure. But they took a group from Boulder and a group from Colorado Springs who I guess might be conservative. And they put them together and they had them discuss some controversial issues. And a lot of them didn't really have strong opinions. But they leaned to the left, they leaned to the right on something like climate change, maybe criminal justice, something like that. And they found out after they talked to like-minded people, they moved to more extreme positions. Right? They held their positions more strongly and they moved to more extreme positions. A lot of things you might, like hearing your position reinforced. You go, wow, I'm really smart, because they're thinking like I am. I don't know. And you become more confident in your position. Or you never hear contradictory arguments. And so I think one of the things with the internet is we're sort of segregating into the information we get into more like-minded people. And that could be a really problem. If you're only looking at, if you're ideologically all fire is evil, and you're only talking to people that think all fire is evil, then the data you're going to look at is going to reinforce that opinion oftentimes. Or if you're, a very strong component of law and order, you may be very much in favor of strong and stiff and long penalties, even if that doesn't do the job, right? If you're only talking to like-minded people and only getting this sort of information, right? So I think in terms of the social sphere, there's a couple of things that I think are important is people are using, just to sort of wrap it up, the science, the fact that we are finite and fallible, and science in gathering information is a human enterprise, and it'll always be incomplete, and people are abusing that to advance their own private interest against the public good. And in fact, they're not trustworthy. They're not, as citizens, exercising their responsibility, I think. And the other one is we're slipping in because of this. Another great experiment we're performing on each other is the internet, the way we're getting information and news, and the way we're aggregating in terms of like-minded people is creating a problem for how we can know the truth in this post-truth era. And so I think my colleagues here, we all have responsibilities, right? Scientists, educators, administrators, to our students, to you as citizens, but we're also citizens, right? Because we're all in this together. And the sort of decisions we make will affect the world that our kids have to live in, and our grandkids, and our great-grandkids. And so I think this is an extremely important topic. And I think it's a timely topic to be having. And launching it with very important things like criminal justice and fire, and then we may move beyond that in our examples. But I think this is a great starting point because we're living with these things, right? So thank you. And I'll turn it over to whoever wishes to speak here.
Let me add another F to that set that you gave out there, and that's fallacies. I'm interested in the brain and the mind, and anytime you look at the way human beings make decisions, it's very quickly clear that we base it often on some pretty squishy things. And in fact, some of the talks we heard going forward, in this session over the last couple of weeks, we learned that some pretty strange decisions have been made at times. And I think that's that's a responsibility we have to understand how we make decisions and try to make them better. That's part of the responsibility that our legislature has. It's a responsibility we have as educators to make sure students understand how their minds work. This has a lot of implications, but I might recommend to you a book by Daniel Kahneman. He's a Nobel laureate, excuse me, in economics. And he wrote this book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. You might have seen it in a bookstore. It's been prominently displayed lots of places. And he makes an interesting observation there that we are all intuitive grammarians. By the time we're 4 years old, we're fluent at grammar. We know how to correctly put sentences together, and grammar can be very complicated, but we don't have to be taught it. We know it. It's actually built into our brains. On the other hand, to make decisions of complex sorts like the sort that we heard about in the last couple of weeks, when to fight fires, how to fight them, what kind of laws to use to control the possibility of crime among our youth, how to deal with them once they're possibly incarcerated. Those require policy decisions based on a lot of information, statistics. And the one thing we're not intuitively good at is making decisions about numbers and statistics and understanding probability. In fact, what Kahneman really made his name on was the idea that we are intrinsically flawed. We are subject to fallacies when we make these sorts of decisions. And the deans sometimes will sit around and will say, if you could demand one course that all students would take in college, what would that be? And of course, it's a faux question. You don't really want to go there. But it would be probability and statistics for me, because our minds are just not equipped to handle that. There's a whole series of rules of thumb we intrinsically fall back on when we have to make tough decisions. And training in that is not something that we require of people who make important decisions in our society. And so there's no guarantee that our legislators, even completely well-meaning and even quite aware of policy issues and what's going on in the state, for example, are necessarily going to come up with the right decision. Because we base things on the most recent information we have. We base it on a series of guesses that we make. We base it on all kinds of subjective things that we have no awareness of. It's an implicit bias. The biases we bring to decision making that we're not even aware of. And there's about 15 of them been uncovered by psychologists. And every student in college should know about it. Every legislator should know about it so they can more cogently make decisions that are going to affect our lives and our kids. So the fallacy issue to me is a big one. And if nothing else, as a university, we have a responsibility to help kids understand, and the general public understand, what these fallacies are, how we can better make decisions so that we can do a better job of keeping our society healthy and progressing. So I just think that's an important perspective.
And as a teacher, I would say that one of the biggest challenge is to give information to students and give it in the right context, right? So that the piece of information in a given context tells one thing, but in another context, it might mean nothing. And that's actually very challenging. So in the case, for instance, I do natural sciences, forest ecology and whatnot, and you might show students, here we did this restoration project at Snowball, for instance, with these beautiful old growth trees. And they responded, so the project consisted in different treatments. We evaluated the different treatments. The trees responded beautifully. These are 350-year-old trees, responded beautifully right away to the treatments, which consisted in removing the understory. And there was some positive effects of adding the fire, which is a natural element. So the conclusion might be, these treatments are effective. and absolutely, if we're interested in the health of that particular tree that we're trying to protect, there is no question. You know, the year after, or the 10 years after, those treatments do what we want them to do. Now, from here to, are these treatments at the landscape level that we carry throughout the western United States, are they effective? The question is a resounding no. We have no data to show that what we try doing in managing forests is actually doing anything, because we're treating a tremendously small part of the landscape. So we're using a lot of money treating forests, and we probably, if we could treat the landscape, that would be effective. But we can't. And so from one truth to the next, you know, the answer is very different. And so that's and students don't, so that's one thing about education. Students don't like to be told, I'm going to tell you this. And then you're going to have to put this in the box of, it depends, which is really what also medicine is about, right? It depends. You know, you're going to go to the doctor, they're going to identify something, and they're going to say, you have this problem, and you have to do this, this, and that. Well, the truth is that it depends a lot of the times. So, and when it comes to our health, you know, if we're told, I'm going to have to cut a leg, you're going to inform yourself of all the consequences and all the alternatives, and is this really what I need to do before you really go and cut the leg?
So I'll follow up on Anna's discussion on fire and just think a little bit about how science is a evolutionary process. When through the 50s and 60s and 70s, we had a particularly cool, wet period, and I think that would have been discussed when Phil Higuera was talking. And during that period, the Forest Service had a policy of out by 10. So if there was a fire start or ignition, they would put it out by 10 o'clock in the morning, and they were very, very effective at doing that. And the assumption was, and what they had learned from that is that fire suppression would work. They could keep fire out of the woods. And they basically had a narrative then for the public that was, we can stop fire. We have the tools, we have the technology. We are now in a completely different climatic period. We're in a very dry, hot, long fire season period compared to the 50s and 60s. And these conditions that existed during that period when there were these fire starts or ignitions in the 50s and 60s, today when we have the perfect storm of hot, dry, windy, low humidity, and we have a fire start, putting it out by 10 o'clock ends up being almost impossible. So during that long period of time of effective fire suppression, plus the fact that even today we're capable of putting out 97% of the fires that start, we actually are able to extinguish before they become large catastrophic fires. It's that 3% that break out during these incredible hot, dry, windy conditions and take flight. So the point is that we now have a completely different understanding of firefighting than we did 50 years ago. And it's not that we were wrong in terms of we were applying what we knew at the time, but today we know that that's not going to work. And the Forest Service is looking at how to share with the public. We were wrong. We can't put out all fires by 10 o'clock in the morning. We are now in a situation where we have a combination of forests have been heavily managed throughout the inland Northwest, and those that were heavily managed came back in more heavily stocked than they were in their native state because of opening up those canopies, we got, during that cool, wet period, we got a very rapid growth of more shade-tolerant species, such as Douglas fir, which really isn't a shade-tolerant species, but compared to ponderosa pine it is. And it grows quickly, and we ended up with these heavily stocked forests. That combined with, as was discussed by Andrew and Anna, that combined with approximately 100 years of fire suppression and fire exclusion has resulted in this condition where we had fires erupt last summer here in western Montana, and there was no way we were going to put them out using all these techniques that we thought were so effective during that cool, wet period. So both science and application are an evolutionary process. So let me back up just for a sec now and talk about science as an evolutionary process in terms of, as we learn, we build on it, and today in the information age, we are able to publish so much faster than we were when Chris was young, for example. And I was thinking about my dad is an academic, and he published papers when I was a kid, and it was all done with a typewriter and with carbon copies, and you'd send this off to a journal, and you'd slowly wait for it to come back in the mail with comments written on it by a peer reviewer. That's how science gets processed. We do the science that Anna was talking about in the field. We then have to do the statistics on it, determine the probability of whether that treatment was really successful or not, or whether it, and then we write that up as a publication and we submit it for peer review. And back in the 50s and 60s, that took about 6 months or 12 months to get a paper sent back after you submitted it for review. And so one of my colleague here, Dick Sheridan, who some of you may know, he was a professor here, died unfortunately young, but he said, who grew up in that era, said, always write like you're chiseling it in stone. And that, I think you didn't have much of a choice in the 60s because you didn't want to get anything wrong because it was such a long, hard process. Whereas today, things are being published very, very quickly. There's these a whole host of online journals that have popped up in the last 10 years that not only process the journal article very quickly and get it posted online quickly, but the process of peer review is exceptionally short. And so the process of science coming to society is becoming quicker and quicker. And with that, some of the F's that Dane was referring to are being exploited more and more. Because now instead of 5 journals that address forestry worldwide, there's 75, 100 journals that address forestry in one form or another. And a large number of them are online. And people are publishing papers from all over the world. And you can pick and choose. You can cherry pick that evidence which you want that helps tell the narrative that you want to tell. And so it's the responsibility of scientists to help filter that for the public and not only conduct peer-reviewed research and publish papers, but help bring that science to the public in a way that, that clarifies and helps eliminate or pull out of the way those papers that are actually flawed that ended up getting published in this rapid system that has evolved. So.
There's another aspect to that too, which is that in the old days, your data stayed in your laboratory and you didn't show it to anybody. You would publish an abstract of it in the paper. And nowadays, if you get federal funding, all the data, every bit of it has to be deposited electronically on a website. And so it's publicly accessible. So for many of the key findings that we would be discussing, whether it's forestry or brain science or anything, you can go online and find the original data and look at it yourself and see the many, many graphs that were produced in the process of getting to some conclusions. The Human Genome Project, you can find the gene sequences that have been collected there in a massive database. And there's tools to go in and pick through those and find trends in that data. And then the same thing with brain scans now. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of brain scans that are online for different conditions. And you can go through and get the scan and you can put them together into 3D. You can rotate the brain to see how it looks different or not, how it was changed in its function by being activated in one way or another. And that's all accessible to you because you're a taxpayer and your support has allowed that research to take place. So I would encourage you to do that. And I would actually, a shout out for the library here on the campus. The U of M library is a great portal for that. There's a lot of databases that are accessible through that. And if you're in a computer on campus here, you can go through that portal and have access to an incredible world of data and just take a look at it yourself and take a peek at it. And we as scientists do that to each other. We go look at the original data sets and sometimes we see something that doesn't look right. And then you're obligated to call it to people's attention. So that's the truth verification process that takes place in science. It makes it kind of dynamic and kind of exciting.
But you better have taken your probability course.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, asking people to analyze data is asking a lot. And I think that you know, that's the job of some, but the job of all is asking what data should be there for somebody to analyze. So that integration that you were, you know, what do we need to go that is outside this box that might be relevant to the problem I'm talking about. And that's what, you know, us as the public should probably go to our legislators and politicians, say, you're telling me and convincing me about this, and that's a very convincing argument, but you're not telling me about this and this and this and this, which is also relevant. What do you have to say about that?
You know, one of the things I think the bar for being a citizen keeps going up. You know, in terms as our world gets more complicated, we get more information, we get more data. And part of my job, I actually started off as a soil scientist. That's where I went. So I got a really broad science education. You do. And soil
Yes,
science is
I'm a soil
great for that, yeah. Then I taught high school science for a few years, and then I went into philosophy, right? I'm on, you know, that's a normal track for people. But I deal with scientists all the time. My research is in, you know, I look at climate change and climate engineering and biotechnology, and now we're looking at conservation biotechnology. And one of the things I think my education did is it made me not afraid of science. You know, I figure, you know, even though the bar is relatively high, I can learn pretty quickly even something like science or you know, I've learned some basic things that I'm not afraid to look at, you know, fire science and understand fire management and listen to people and do that sort of, you know, are they really telling me the truth? Is this a good source? You know, is this person pushing an agenda? So I don't know the details and I can't get into the science very far, but I think I'm science literate such that I'm not afraid of it and I can go in there and kind of detect when someone's trying to pull the wool over my eyes, you know, in terms of pushing their own agenda. So I think I'm grateful for my education in soil science, although I didn't advance to be a soil scientist. But that kind of education I think is important, is people need to overcome that. You know, that fear of, yeah, I can figure this out. I can learn enough to know as a good citizen whether or not someone is pushing their own agenda or working for the public good. And I think the other thing is also philosophy. There's science phobia and there's also philosophophobia. And I think people, you know, think that ethics is for the experts, right? But you guys are doing ethics all the time. I just think you need to do it well. And I think on a lot of these issues, it's just exercising some good citizenship in the sense of knowing enough to whether or not the person that you're listening to or pushing the agenda is trustworthy, right? And I think we can all do that. But we can. I think there's a fear of retreating, right, when the expert comes forth, you know, and you just go, well, and I think you need to stand up to these experts, you know, and judge them, because that's your job, right? And I don't think we need to be afraid of them.
I think a really good that's a really good point, and something to add to that is requiring or requesting that the scientists speak a language that makes sense, because scientists can speak in a lot of jargonese, especially in certain fields. If you think of molecular biology and they start talking about enzyme systems for cleaving, base pairs, and you just turn off after a while. Or if it's a physicist, a nuclear physicist, and talking about subparticle dynamics, and it makes no sense, and yet it potentially very much has relevance, but their obligation to you as a citizen is to make it understandable. It's our job as scientists to not only conduct science, but to convey that science in a way that is tangible and understandable without sacrificing the intricacies of the science that make it complex or make it, most issues are exceptionally complex, and we can't risk, in trying to convey that to the public, you can't risk dumbing it down to a point where you lose the complexity. It has to be a combination of accuracy, completeness, and clarity. But it's our obligation to the public to bring that forward.
When people get grants now, what one has to do to successfully complete a federally funded grant is changed. There's now a requirement that you have an outreach component, and that's for exactly that reason, that the National Science Foundation, for example, feels it's their obligation to make sure that when they fund science, the science gets done, and the scientists make an effort to get the word out to relevant audiences in an understandable format about what they did and what the significance of it is. That's a completely different mindset than would have happened in the 50s and 60s before I was doing science. And it's a good one. I mean, it's social responsibility, and science doesn't get a pass on that. Scientists have to do it just like anybody else does. And maybe it's more acute. If they're getting federal dollars and they're gathering information that's affecting things like life, health, and safety of the community, they have a pretty strong obligation to be clear about what they've done and what they've found.
I agree with that. And I actually like a lot the outreach component, writing about the outreach components. On the other hand, sometimes I find myself thinking, the people that studied in the four corners, the butterflies and whatever the little mice seeds were eating and whatnot, eventually they figure out that there was a what's the disease that rats that have, which one?
Hantavirus?
Yeah, the hantavirus. A lot of that came from there. They wouldn't even have thought that would come from there. So a lot of the times you have to come up with something that is cool, but in reality the value of that is the value of knowledge, and the benefit of it sometimes is to be seen. And it might be enormous. So, and so I think that a good profession that I actually would love to have is the integrator profession. Mm-hmm. Somebody that gets all the science and from all these different, narrow point of views, and puts it all together, and then, deliver it to the public.
That's actually sort of developing. We had a National Science Foundation grant where we brought a bunch of students here to the University of Montana. And it was called Debating Science, and we were looking at controversial issues in science and how to handle those issues. And one of those students went on to be a science communicator. She actually got her PhD in biology, and she was working on genetic engineering. But she went on to become, now she is a science communicator working in Washington, and trying to communicate with the public, some of these things about science. So I think that's kind of emerging. I think part of scientists are realizing this and the importance of it, and I think, some of these examples or things are shifting, right? And it's interesting. I see her. I'm on Facebook sometimes, although now they're changing my political views, I think, and harvesting my data, so I might get off. But I'm still friends with her, and I see her very actively, communicating science, and she's got a nice job and a nice career, trying to get information to people as well as possible. So that's a nice trend.
Should we do questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. We want to hear from you.
For my money, we could do a whole lecture series by having professors just sit down and talk with us like this. And I'm going to take your challenge, Dean Comer. The course that I would like to see at the university, to all students, how to formulate a good question. And come at these problems from an attitude of inquiry. One of the things I think is so wrong is that people are trying to prevail rather than be right in arguments. And I think we could all do well to take a step back, formulate good questions, and ask ourselves, what do we know? How do we know it? Okay.
I'm somewhat familiar with academic medicine, and there are literally hundreds of journals in medicine. And I wonder how many more studies of coffee we need. More than 50% of the medical articles published are never again cited. Now, I'm going to ask the question, and I'm not sure it'll be a good one, but what responsibility does academics have for generating a mass of published articles, internet or otherwise, that have no significance?
Wow.
It's not an issue that we're unaware of. I think that the theory is in the academy, when you're being evaluated, it's not just a question of did you publish papers. It is intended to be a question of are they papers that were important, were read by people, and had an impact. Now, the very science of trying to determine if a publication had an impact is very tricky. That's a statistical thing in itself. But it's a very worthwhile enterprise, and it's important because it is true. I mean, we all know there's niches in science where things can get published, journals which will accept things with very low standards. And, in the field, we avoid those things. I will tell you that lately, I don't know if you get these, in my inbox, I get requests about 5 times a week, would I like to publish in the following journals? They've never heard of them before. They're all for-profit journals. And they're going to get a desperate scientist or other academic who wants to publish and will pay money to publish them, and they're a waste of time. So those things have to be, called out because that's not a good trend. So, the business is competitive as it should be, and within the field, as you would know if you've done academic medicine, there's some journals that are highly respected, and those are the ones you read. And that's why tenure committees want to know not only did you publish, but where did you publish? And now they want to know what's the impact factor, and that's a numerical score on what the impact is.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I would just add to that by saying that although we know that those, that we do look at impact factors and we look at the quality of the journal in which the individual's publishing, it's hard to look past the volume that somebody's publishing, and I can almost guarantee you that scientists around the world, they're under pressure to publish, and they are promoted based on publication much more so than on teaching evaluations and teaching quality. You're promoted and you receive tenure based. And although I agree with Chris that there's, well, when I was living in Great Britain, I was a professor in Great Britain, we had a process called REF. That was a research evaluation framework, which was a nationwide attempt to try and cull out all that garbage and say, how well are these individuals really doing? And it took into account, not just impact factors, but then also how, to what degree was this cited, and how did that modify the knowledge moving forward in that field. And it was tricky. It was a very long and involved process. But I hear you completely. I'm not sure where it ends because the number of journals just keeps increasing. It's difficult for an individual who's reviewing the individual faculty to say, well, you know, I have to go and start drilling down and to see whether these journals are garbage or not, especially if it's outside of my field. But I don't really have a good answer for you in terms of where it ends. Yeah.
I think there is another aspect of, you know, how many studies about coffee or how many studies about mammograms or about whatever, and is who funds the studies. And so that's something, you know, the government has some directives, the different agencies of research priorities, and that's good. Sometimes they might be more biased or less, but at least there is some directives in the government. I think there is value in just knowledge itself, and so that even it's not told top down what you need to do, but to be creative. But, you know, the one thing that I think it's going to become clear is Darwin would have never made tenure, right? And so I think scientists will eventually, we are on this swing of the pendulum, impact factors. Journals are now finding marketing strategies to increase the impact factor. Does that mean that the value of the science is better? No. I mean, sometimes you try to publish to the highest journals, and statistically you have a much higher chance to being accepted if you're dealing with a sexy topic. Is that to the favor of knowledge and science? No. And those are the top journals. So the system needs a lot of fixing, is evolving, but I think it will correct itself to some extent eventually.
Yeah, I think this really, I'm not a scientist, but you know, I do think about incentives, right, in the kinds of research that we incentivize. And so I think a lot of this is, you know, we create incentives and people pursue those incentives, right? And I think one of the things that came up with is I think you guys probably heard about that, you know, made quite a bit of news, was that scientists aren't trying to replicate experiments as much. You know, there's no incentives to replicate experiments. So we don't really know, because science works by checking it out, right? You know, you have to see if that experiment actually worked. 1, 2, shots. And so there's not an incentive system, and that made quite a bit of news. And also the kind of funding, you know, what is interesting or what might be marketable eventually, you know, might not be the best science. So I think we do need to, you know, exercise maintenance. We are going to, you know, create trustworthy science. We need to, you know, step back and how are we incentivizing research, right? And are there incentives to sort of, you know, test the good science that is being done? So I think there's always maintenance here, and I think that what has been brought up as the incentive system may not be serving us well right now.
Okay, more question? There's a question.
Since we're on a university campus, I wonder if you could comment a little bit on how we are training our students here at UM. We are a liberal arts institution, and I wonder if you could just say a little bit about what the value of a liberal arts education is. Should we just be teaching probability and statistics?
No. Absolutely not. So, I mean, this is my own view, but it's from watching students struggle with their education for many years. There's more than one way to get to, not truth, but a better understanding of the world. And it doesn't all come out of math books or from science. Sometimes an amazing novel will give you insight about the world. So a humanistic approach to life is equally important to one that's quantified and scientific. And to be a full, that phrase that Jesuit colleges use and our new president has used a little bit lately, educating the whole person, requires more than just science. And the liberal arts is intended to be a strong base that extends across many areas of human knowledge and ways of knowing. And that's what we try to do in Montana, and I think it's a noble pursuit. We don't always hit it, but it's a very worthwhile thing to give a holistic education option to students. And others might have different.
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, that's why I'm got a job. You know, I interact with students in the College of Forestry, and we read philosophy, right? We read a book by Michael Sandel on justice, right? And why are we reading this? And because you need to understand theories of distributive justice to deal with a lot of issues in conservation, because a lot of them are just basic issues of how we distribute goods, and there's a lot of theories, and we're debating that all the time. And we read fiction. I'm reading an Ethics and Public Affairs course. Brave New World, which is a great book, right? Which is a novel, but it imagines a future, right? And so I think a lot of a lot of good science fiction raises these great ethical issues about the interactions in ways that scientists couldn't, right? You know, all this, a lot of the things in Brave New World when he wrote the book were really science fiction. Now they're becoming science possibilities, right? and so I think, the philosopher calls it casuistry of the imagination, and where we try to imagine the future and figure out what kind of ethical principles we need to deal with those things. And I think Brave New World did a great job, because once this stuff has come online, we've taken it really seriously, and we refer to it as Brave New World, right? And it shows how the literary imagination really kind of prepared us in some ways to deal with the now reality that science is sort of, we're kind of faced with. So, I'm all for having the philosopher in the College of Forestry.
There's been a number of studies conducted lately, Jenny, that support the notion that a liberal arts education is actually what most employers are looking for, even though there's all the hype around STEM currently, and STEM is indeed important part of a whole liberal arts education in terms of there is science, you have your general ed requirements incorporating some level of science literacy as well. But for example, Google did the Aristotle study. I don't know how many of you have seen that. It was a study conducted within Google to determine what were they really looking for in their employees, and what was the makeup of their best employees. And it wasn't it wasn't coders and computer programmers. No offense to the computer programmers in the audience, but it was people with good interpersonal human skills. Drama, people that had come out of drama and knew how to interact and knew how to take an insult, for example, and not get overwhelmed by it. It was people with good communication skills. And the Pinchot Institute, which is named after Gifford Pinchot, of course, did an extensive study recently on what natural resource industry and agencies are looking for in their employees, because a lot of the forest industry and forest agency employers would tell me, well, you're not training your people with boots on the ground forestry anymore. Well, the Pinchot Institute did this in-depth survey of the employers, natural resource employers all over the nation, and the number one skill that employers were looking for was communication skills. The second one was critical thinking skills. Third was interpersonal communication skills or interpersonal skills. It was amazing. Silviculture was down, at about 14th or something. I mean, it's still in there. It's important. We have to teach. But the fact is the employer is going to teach them in the way they want, as long as they have fundamental skills that set them up to learn that in the field, as well as have these liberal arts-based skills as well.
Think of another profession. Think of medicine again. That
Yeah.
I would like to deal with a medical professional who's a great diagnostician, is really smart, but I want an empathetic human being as well.
Yeah.
And medicine lately has undergone some pretty dramatic changes with electronic medical records that have, it seems to me, maybe changed the dynamic a little bit between providers and patients, and that's its own special topic. But it's that human dimension is so important, and that's what a full education is supposed to bring. So you get a sense of balance.
And it's not only that. I mean, what it does, I think, in my opinion, is to expose students to very different topics, very different perspectives, and that they actually end up all being related. So it's that giving raw material for them then to put together and integrate. And that's sometimes the difficult part. What I'm telling you about wood actually has consequences of why Stradivarius violins are so expensive, because we don't have those trees that made the wood when they grew. Was used to make the violins, and so they can relate history and biology and biomechanics and etc. And that's I think the aspect that students are very uncomfortable, because they like, unfortunately, in my opinion, we've trained students in elementary, middle, and high school to just store facts, but not really to process information and to think critically about it. And so sometimes they come to college, and it takes a little bit of an effort for them to realize, no, it's not enough. The facts are not enough. You have to integrate them. You have to put them together.
Another question? Another question.
This is kind of a follow-up question. I believe that with electronic publications and so on, that the date of publication is also the date of release to the general public and press. If we had a different approach, so that there was a delay of a month or 6 weeks, so that the rest of the peers had a chance to weigh in, then we might have a more balanced reporting in the lay press. I just wondered if that's a consideration.
Interesting idea, yeah. I mean, I think that the relationship between the lay press and science is always a slightly tricky one anyway. I don't know where you guys consume I mean, as a scientist, there's so much of science I can't stay on top of. So I have chosen 1 or 2 outlets that I trust, because I've noticed that they get the news quickly and they analyze it in ways that I can understand. I'm not a physicist, I'm a biologist, but I want to know some physics and chemistry, and so I trust those outlets that I know are going to get it to me quickly and explain it in a way that's cogent and I can absorb it. And those are special sources. You want to really pay attention to those. There's lots of newspapers that do not cover science very well in this country. And there's some websites that do a great job of it.
There's a program on campus currently, and I can't speak to it particularly well. Maybe Chris or Dane or Anna want to pick up on this, but it connects journalism students with science students, graduate students, and faculty. And they work together and learn from one another about scientists, about how to do outreach type communication, and the journalists about the science. And it's a really powerful relationship. And I've seen some of those students and student pairs in action, and it's impressive, and it's a way to move forward on that front, I think.
And I actually have had 3 of those graduate students do internship in my lab, and it's interesting sometimes how new to them, even though they are trained in environmental journalism and whatnot, how new to them is our approach and what we do, and how difficult it really is to explain the results, because that simple, catchy story, it's actually not that simple. And so it is tempting to make it very simple, very catchy, but you know what? It rarely is. And so how to bring these nuances, and those are the important ones actually when we put things in context, is very difficult.
Okay, any other questions?
Can I ask a question to the audience? I'm curious if you sat through all of the series or even just a part of it. I'll ask from the fire perspective. Did any of what was presented help clear the air for you with regard to fire history, fire management, forest management? And because there was a lot, I mean, this was chosen as part of the topic, the fire clearing the air, because of course the smoke that we were all breathing last summer, but more so because there was so much information being spun out there, both in the media as well as even with our legislative delegation, trying to get a handle on how do we deal with this. And there was a lot of misinformation out there, just speaking from a scientist that works in that area. But I'm curious if this was helpful to you in clearing the air.
Anybody want to respond to Tom? Nod heads?
One down here. There's one down here.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, as far as fire history goes, could you comment a little bit on climate history, especially climatic events? I mean, you have changes in climate and periods of time, but for instance, in 2002, I was skiing in the Bear Paw Mountains, which had quite a bit of snowpack, but the surrounding plains had a real dry year, real dry fall. So what they had was a dust storm that appeared on Doppler radar. And I mean, it's memorable to me because, I mean, all of a sudden this dust come over the mountains, and what it did to the snowpack was like melted immediately, with the warming temperatures. This was like in April. And it's one of those, it's a narrative, but it's also, there's also that history from the National Weather Service, or NOAA, of that event showing up on Doppler radar. So it's those particular events that we have to be reminded that with what's happening right now, we could really have another climatic event.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're absolutely in a warmer, drier period, and we have more extreme climatic events currently as well, and these being a product of a warming globe. And so your observation about the dust is absolutely spot on. When we have dust storms, whether here locally or overseas, and we have deposition of that dust on snow, it accelerates the melting of the snow. So it's not just the temperature increase, it's these snowballing effects, or, sorry, bad choice, that really exacerbate and build on.
I have a comment in light of your question. And I think, listening to the program, I come from it without a lot of questions in fire, having been a hardcore suppressionist. And a lot of the audience at the time were people who had careers in fire management. And when I tell somebody, I'm now retired, but when I tell somebody that was my career, they say, and even researchers say, well, what do you think about this controversy about suppression versus the natural role of fire? And I have to tell you, I don't know anybody in fire who was not an advocate of reintroducing fire to the ground. And if anything, what I noticed, Anna, your comment just a little earlier about when you did the treatment, it was very successful, but very tiny. And the one I use is, we all can see in our own yards how much the vegetation grows each year. But what we need to do is multiply that times the acres, and there's no way we're burning enough
Right.
to keep up. So your comment was understated. If I felt anything, it was the academics were maybe understating, feeling like, gee, I have to be careful around this controversy, because there are so many people maybe who don't live in Missoula, who don't live in Boulder, who have a different appreciation, and we're just not getting the word out. And the way I look at it is, we should take all the smoke jumpers, all the air tankers, all the helicopters, all the sirens, and when a real good, tight prescription opens up to do that kind of prescription you're talking about, we should pounce on it and start running down these ridges with drip torches and getting, in a landscape scale, some holes burned in, so we can then run things into it. A lot of times when the smoke does clear, they do the analysis, and what we said was 100,000 acres was devastated. Well, it wasn't. There might be 10 or 20% stand replacement damage, and the rest of it just had a pretty darn good underburn that had, if we did that 2 or 3 more times in the next X number of years, we'd have a pretty good looking forest again. So there's my response to your comments.
And I think that, yeah, that you're absolutely right. I mean, and this is when we need to think very critically, what's our ultimate goal? What do we want to do? We're not going to change climate. We might be able to perhaps curve the situation, but we're not going to change climate. So what is the ultimate goal? And given that, then what kind of data, what do we need to help address that question? And for instance, one of the articles that I read while preparing, I don't know if it was in the Washington Post or in a big paper, and it it mentioned something like, the problem is that Clinton in the 90s prevented logging in the back roads. That's the problem, and now the budget has scale. I mean, it's phenomenal. Somebody that reads that and doesn't know anything else might think, wow, that's a problem. But then there is the responsibility that we all have, is what are the data do we not know? What is causing this extraordinarily phenomenal firefighting cost today, which is 55% of the Forest Service budget, of the whole agency. 55 goes to firefighting. Well, what that article didn't say is that along with these policies of perhaps not logging enough, there has been a disproportionate increase of encroachment into the wildland-urban interface. And so that's probably, and there is no question that there is a correlation between fire activity, particularly in warmer climates, and the amount of people that live in forested areas. And so that's the other piece of data that we as public need to think and request and demand. What other data do we need to really make informed decisions of what we need to do?
Okay, last chance. Any questions or comments anyone would like to make?
Going once, going twice.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to, again, thank all the presenters, both here tonight and for the other nights when we had lectures. So, round of applause for the presenters. Are we doing evaluation? Yeah, so at the reception, there will be forms around where you can give your feedback that will help us improve this program. We've done it for 20 years. I hope we keep doing it. And I hope that we continue to have your interest and that you'll tell your friends, your family, that this is worth their Tuesday evening to come hear something from the amazing things that are going on at the University of Montana. It's just, every time I learn something about what's going on here in terms of research and academic advancement, it makes me proud to be an alum. So, thank you for coming, and please join us at the reception.